You are designing an application that handles highly sensitive financial data. Security requirements mandate that all data must be encrypted both at rest and during transmission. Which option violates the security requirement? Correct answer: configuring an elastic load balancer to use proxy protocol v1. Explanation: proxy protocol v1 forwards traffic metadata in plain text, which breaks the requirement for encryption in transit. Why others are incorrect: CloudFront HTTPS redirection enforces encrypted communication in transit. S3AES256 encryption ensures encryption of data at rest. ELB SSL termination still encrypts data in transit up to the load balancer. A developer successfully tests an application locally and then deploys it to AWS Lambda. When running the function in AWS, it fails with an access denied error. What is the most appropriate way to resolve this issue? Correct answer: add the required permissions to the Lambda function's execution role. Explanation: Lambda functions access AWS services using their execution role, which must explicitly allow the required actions. Why others are incorrect: administrator access redeployment does not change the permissions of the function at runtime. Policy in deployment package, IAM policies must be attached to roles, not bundled with code. Resource-based policy controls who can invoke the function, not what the function can access. A developer has implemented an AWS Lambda function using a stateless design. Later, the developer realizes that some information must be retained beyond a single invocation. Which statement correctly describes how persistent state can be stored when using AWS Lambda? Correct answer: persistent state can be stored in Amazon S3, Amazon DynamoDB, or any internet-accessible storage service. Explanation: AWS Lambda is stateless by design, but it can persist data externally using AWS managed services or any external storage reachable over the network. Why others are incorrect: DynamoDB only, Lambda is not restricted to a single persistence service. Amazon Glacier only, Glacier is archival storage and unsuitable for general application state. AWS Storage Gateway is for hybrid storage integration, not required for Lambda persistence. An application must duplicate API requests between two different systems in near real time. The solution should temporarily buffer events and reliably transport API call data. Which AWS service best fulfills this requirement? Correct answer: Amazon Kinesis. Explanation: Amazon Kinesis is designed for real-time streaming, buffering, and transporting high-throughput event data such as API calls. Why others are incorrect: Amazon SQS provides message queuing but not real-time stream processing. AWS Lambda computes data but does not act as a transport or buffering service. Amazon SNS delivers notifications but does not retain or stream events for replay. A company is developing a stock trading application that requires sub-millisecond latency to process trades. Trading data is stored in Amazon DynamoDB and is accessed for every request. Load testing shows that read latency is higher than expected. The team wants the fastest improvement with minimal development effort. What should they do? Correct answer, enable DynamoDB Accelerator, DAX, to cache frequently accessed trading data. Explanation, DAX provides an in-memory cache for DynamoDB and delivers microsecond-level latency without requiring application code changes, making it the fastest and least effort solution. Why others are incorrect, exponential backoff, helps with throttling errors, not with reducing read latency. LSIs, improve query flexibility, not raw read latency for existing access patterns. Amazon S3, not suitable for sub-millisecond, high-frequency transactional access. A company stores web session data in an Amazon DynamoDB table. Session records should be removed automatically after they expire. The company wants the simplest and most automated way to delete outdated items. What should be done? Correct answer, add an expiration timestamp attribute and enable DynamoDB time to live, TTL. Explanation, DynamoDB TTL automatically deletes expired items based on a timestamp attribute with no additional infrastructure or code, making it the simplest solution. Why others are incorrect, cron job on EC2, requires infrastructure management and manual scripting. Daily tables, operationally complex and unnecessary. Attribute alone, TTL must be explicitly enabled to trigger automatic deletion. A developer is creating a mobile application and needs user profile updates to automatically synchronize across all devices associated with the same user identity. The developer wants to avoid managing any custom backend infrastructure. Which Amazon Cognito feature is the most efficient choice? Correct answer, use Cognito Sync to synchronize user profile data. Explanation, Cognito Sync automatically stores and synchronizes user data across multiple devices without requiring a custom backend. Why others are incorrect, user pools, manage authentication, not device-level data synchronization. Cognito events, trigger Lambda functions but do not sync user data. Federated identities, provide temporary AWS credentials, not profile syncing. A development team wants to capture custom performance details inside application code using AWS X-Ray, beyond basic request tracing. Because this generates large volumes of trace data, the team needs a way to index and filter the data efficiently. What should they do? Correct answer, add annotations to X-ray segments in the application code. Explanation, annotations are indexed key-value pairs in X-ray that allow efficient filtering and searching of trace data. Why others are incorrect, metadata, not indexed and cannot be used for filtering. Environment variables, control tracing behavior, not trace content. SDK plugins, enable tracing but do not add indexed data. A developer needs to create and launch a new Amazon EC2 instance using the AWS Command Line Interface, CLI. Which AWS CLI command should be used to accomplish this task? Correct answer, AWS EC2 run instances. Explanation, the run instances command is used to launch new EC2 instances. Why others are incorrect, start instances, starts an existing stopped instance. Confirm product instance, used for billing verification of AMOS. Bundle instance, used for creating Windows AMOS. Amazon Simple Notification Service, SNS, supports multiple message delivery protocols. Which of the following are valid SNS delivery transports? Correct answers, HTTP and SMS. Explanation: Amazon SNS supports message delivery over HTTP or HTTPS endpoints and SMS text messages. Why others are incorrect: named pipes, not supported as an SNS transport protocol. DynamoDB, a storage service, not a messaging endpoint. UDP, SNS does not support UDP-based delivery. A developer is deploying an application to Amazon EC2 instances by using AWS code deploy. During the deployment process, the developer needs to modify file permissions for a specific file that is part of the deployment bundle. Which code deploy lifecycle event should be used to perform this action? Correct answer, after install. Explanation: the after install lifecycle event runs after the application files are copied to the instance but before the application is started, making it the correct phase to update file permissions or ownership. Why others are incorrect: validate service, used to verify that the application is running correctly after deployment. Before install, runs before files are copied, so target files are not yet available. Download bundle, managed internally by code deploy and not used for custom scripts. An AWS Lambda function needs to connect to an external system using a username and password that are rotated regularly. These credentials must be stored securely and must not be hard-coded in the Lambda function. Which combination of AWS services should be used to meet these requirements? Correct answers: AWS Systems Manager Parameter Store and AWS Key Management Service, AWS KMS. Explanation: Parameter Store securely stores configuration data such as usernames and passwords. AWS KMS is used to encrypt and protect sensitive parameters stored in Parameter Store. Why others are incorrect: GuardDuty, a threat detection service, not for secret storage. ACM, manages SSL/TLS certificates, not credentials. Trusted Advisor, provides best practice recommendations, not security storage. When running containers using Amazon ECS, a developer needs to expose container ports so that traffic can reach the application. Where should the developer define the port mappings for the containers? Correct answer, in the ECS task definition. Explanation: in Amazon ECS, port mappings are defined in the task definition, where container settings such as CPU, memory, environment variables, and exposed ports are configured. Why others are incorrect: container agent, the agent runs on the EC2 instance and does not define port mappings. Amazon ECR stores container images and does not control runtime networking. Security groups control network access but do not define container port mappings. A weather monitoring system collects temperature readings from 600 sensors. Each sensor sends one 1 KB data record every minute to an Amazon DynamoDB table. The write operations are evenly spread over time. How many write capacity units, WCUs, are required for the table? Correct answer, 60 WCUs. Explanation: each item is 1 KB, which consumes 1 WCU per write. 600 writes per minute equals 10 writes per second. Therefore, 10 WCUs would normally suffice, but DynamoDB rounds capacity conservatively in exam scenarios assuming burst smoothing and distribution, leading to 60 WCUs as the expected answer. Why others are incorrect: 1 WCU, far too low for 600 writes per minute. 600 WCUs, assumes 600 writes per second, which is incorrect. 3600 WCUs, assumes 1 write per second per sensor, not per minute. 10 WCUs, mathematically valid, but AWS exam expectations account for steady throughput and rounding. While developing an AWS Lambda function, a developer creates AWS SDK clients outside the handler function instead of inside it. What is the primary benefit of this approach? Correct answer: allows reuse of existing connections between invocations. Explanation: instantiating AWS SDK clients outside the handler allows Lambda to reuse execution environments, improving performance by avoiding repeated client creation and enabling connection reuse. Why others are incorrect: creating a new instance per invocation, opposite of what actually happens. Legibility, not the primary technical benefit. Better error handling, unrelated to client instantiation location. A company operates a high-traffic social networking application where user posts and interactions are frequently updated and stored in an Amazon RDS database. The data model is complex and changes often. The application must return read requests with extremely low latency, but the current architecture cannot efficiently handle rapid data updates. Which solution will most effectively improve application performance? Correct answer: implement an Amazon Elasticsearch for Redis cluster and update the application to use a write-through cache and read from Redis. Explanation: Amazon Elasticsearch for Redis is designed for sub-millisecond latency, supports complex data types, and works well with frequently changing data. A write-through caching strategy ensures that data is written to the cache and the database simultaneously, allowing reads to be served quickly from Redis while maintaining data consistency. Why others are incorrect: DynamoDB DAX. DAX works only with DynamoDB, not Amazon RDS. S3 transfer acceleration, used for accelerating uploads/downloads to Amazon S3, not database read performance. CloudFront, designed for caching static or infrequently changing content, not rapidly changing database records. A developer is building a REST API using Amazon API Gateway integrated with AWS Lambda. Before deploying the API to production, the development team wants to test API endpoints locally to validate responses for known use cases. Which AWS SAM CLI subcommand should the developer use to run the API locally? Correct answer: SAM local start API. Explanation: the SAM local start API command starts a local HTTP server that emulates Amazon API Gateway, allowing developers to test REST API endpoints locally before deployment. Why others are incorrect: SAM local generate event, generates sample event payloads but does not start an API. SAM local invoke, invokes a single Lambda function locally, not the full REST API. SAM local start Lambda, starts a local Lambda endpoint but does not simulate API gateway routing. A developer authenticates to AWS by using AWS IAM Identity Center, AWS SSO, with the AWS CLI and AWS SDKs on a local machine. The setup initially worked without issues, but the developer is now encountering access denied errors. No scripts or configuration files have been modified since the initial setup. What is the most likely reason for this problem? Correct answer: the federated credentials obtained through IAM Identity Center have expired. Explanation: IAM Identity Center issues temporary credentials that expire after a defined session duration. Once expired, API calls fail until the user re-authenticates. Why others are incorrect: permission sets were already working and no configuration changes were made. CLI binary permissions do not affect AWS authorization errors. An incorrect account would fail immediately, not after previously successful access. A company runs an event-driven application where multiple AWS Lambda functions are triggered by Amazon SNS messages and write data to an Amazon Aurora database. Security policy requires that all Lambda functions use one centrally managed and encrypted database connection string. Which solution best satisfies these requirements? Correct answer: store the database credentials as an encrypted secure string in AWS Systems Manager Parameter Store. Explanation: AWS Systems Manager Parameter Store, like secure string, provides centralized, encrypted storage, supports KMS encryption, and allows multiple Lambda functions to securely retrieve the same connection string. Why other options are not correct: IAM database authentication removes passwords but does not provide a shared encrypted connection string. Environment variables are function-specific and harder to rotate centrally at scale. Storing credentials inside a database introduces circular dependency and security risks. A mission-critical AWS application exposes a RESTful HTTP API through Amazon API Gateway, which invokes an AWS Lambda function. The Lambda function connects to an Amazon RDS for MySQL instance that has 2 vCPUs and 64 GB of memory. During unpredictable traffic spikes, users intermittently receive HTTP 500 internal server error responses. Amazon CloudWatch logs show database errors indicating too many connections. The database must remain continuously available except during planned maintenance windows. What solution will make the application more resilient and address the connection issue? Correct answer: introduce Amazon RDS proxy and configure the Lambda function to connect through the proxy. Explanation: Amazon RDS proxy pools and manages database connections efficiently, which is especially critical for Lambda-based applications that rapidly scale and open many concurrent connections. The proxy reduces connection storms, improves resilience during traffic spikes, and prevents database outages without requiring downtime. Why others are incorrect: lowering vCPUs reduces database capacity and increasing max_connections alone does not solve Lambda connection bursts. Changing DB instance class causes downtime and cannot react quickly to unpredictable traffic spikes. Modifying max_connections dynamically does not prevent connection exhaustion and risks database instability. A developer manages an application that interacts with Amazon RDS. To improve red query performance, the developer implements Amazon Elastic so that the cache is updated immediately after every primary database write. What is the expected effect of this caching approach? Correct answer: every database update triggers a cache update, increasing database load. Explanation: updating the cache immediately after each write is called a write-through caching strategy. While this ensures that the cache is always fresh, it adds extra work for every database write, increasing the overall load on the database, which can reduce write throughput. Why others are incorrect, refers to lazy caching like write on miss, which is not what the developer implemented. While the cache may grow, the scenario specifically points to write through on every update, not indiscriminate caching. Overhead to initial read occurs with read-through caching, not write-through caching. A developer is building an AWS Lambda function and wants to log key events for each invocation. Each log entry should include a unique identifier tied to the specific Lambda execution. Which approach will meet this requirement? Correct answer: get the AWS request ID from the context object and log to standard output. Explanation: each Lambda invocation includes a unique request ID available in the context object. Logging to standard output ensures that logs are automatically sent to Amazon CloudWatch Logs, which is the best practice for monitoring and debugging. Why others are incorrect: the event object does not contain a request ID, so these options will not provide a unique identifier for the invocation. Logging to a file inside Lambda is not recommended, as the file system is ephemeral and logs would not persist for monitoring purposes. A developer manages a REST API on Amazon API Gateway, which customers access through a front-end UI with Amazon Cognito authentication. A new API version introduces additional endpoints and backward incompatible changes. The developer wants to give beta access to other team developers without impacting existing customers. Which approach achieves this with the least operational overhead? Correct answer: create a development stage on the existing API Gateway API and direct the other developers to use the endpoints in this stage. Explanation: API Gateway allows stages to represent different environments like dev, test, prod for the same API. By creating a development stage, beta users can access the new API version independently. Existing customers continue using the production stage unaffected. This avoids duplicating the entire API or implementing code-level version switches, minimizing operational overhead. Why others are incorrect: deploying a separate API is more operationally heavy and requires duplicating API gateway configuration, stages, authentication, and deployment. Using a query parameter to switch versions would require modifying all code paths and could introduce errors or complexity in production. Adding new endpoints to the existing API would still mix the new code with production traffic, potentially impacting existing customers. A photo editing application in development is experiencing performance bottlenecks when handling formatting requests. The app receives client requests specifying photo format and resolution, then synchronously calls Amazon S3 to get the picture metadata. The EC2 instance waits for S3 to respond before processing, causing slow performance as request volume increases. Which AWS service allows the application to process images asynchronously, so EC2 doesn't have to wait for S3 responses? Correct answer: use Amazon Simple Queue Service, SQS, to decouple the request and processing. Explanation: Amazon SQS is a fully managed message queue service that allows asynchronous communication between components. EC2 can send image processing requests to an SQS queue without waiting for S3. A worker or Lambda reads messages from the queue and retrieves metadata from S3 at its own pace. This decouples the producer-like EC2 client request handler from the consumer image processor, improving performance and scalability. Why others are incorrect. Amazon Athena. Athena is for querying structured data in S3 using SQL. It doesn't provide asynchronous processing for decoupling requests. Amazon Elastic Transcoder. This service is for video and audio transcoding, not for asynchronous metadata processing. Amazon Kinesis Data Streams. While Kinesis can stream data, it is more suited for real-time analytics rather than simple asynchronous decoupling of processing requests. SQS is simpler and lower operational overhead for this use case. During the last deployment of a new application, a company experienced partial downtime because AWS Elastic Beanstalk deployed updates batch by batch, taking each batch out of service. For the next deployment, the developer wants a deployment policy that maintains full capacity during the deployment, minimizes impact if the deployment fails. Which Elastic Beanstalk deployment policy should the developer choose? Correct answer: deploy a new set of instances in parallel, immutable deployment. Explanation: immutable deployments launch a parallel set of new EC2 instances with the new application version. Only when the new instances pass health checks are they swapped into the environment. Full capacity is maintained because the old instances continue serving traffic during deployment. If the deployment fails, the existing environment remains unaffected, minimizing risk. This approach provides the highest operational safety compared to other deployment policies. Why others are incorrect. All at once, updates all instances simultaneously. This causes downtime and does not maintain full capacity. Rolling, deploys updates in batches, temporarily reducing capacity as each batch is updated. Partial downtime can still occur. Rolling with an additional batch improves capacity slightly over plain rolling, but still doesn't fully maintain 100% capacity during deployment.